I grew up on the hero's journey. And obviously, that means that that's my writing style, right? That's where I started to learn to write. But no, it actually comes before that. I mean, every book that I read, every movie that I saw, every game that I played, it either influenced or was influenced by the hero's journey. I mean, it's been such a momentous aid for every writer. Even the ones who don't use it, they use something that was influenced by that. And yet, as I evolved through my writing, moving from books to games to transmedia, I found out that it wasn't enough. And this is not to say that it's wrong. In fact, if anything, what I'm about to show you today proves it correct. But whatever you use, the hero's journey, the writer's journey, the story circle, Freytag's pyramid, the beat sheet, all of them are going to they're all amazing. I love them. I use them and everything growing up and even in creating this system. But the creative continuum is going to do two things. First of all, it's going to be a lot more full. It's going to break down your narrative into the smallest possible parts available. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to infuse every single one of those parts with meaning. So let me go ahead and show you what I'm going to talk about. First things first, we have to define the difference between a narrative and a story. A lot of people use those interchangeably, but that's not true. A narrative is your book, it's your movie, it's your show, it's your game, it's your completed work of art. But a story is a journey that a character, a relationship, or an idea moves through from the beginning to the end, all in an attempt to display some form of growth. As such, a narrative is actually a collection of stories. You have the protagonist story, of course, but then you have the relationship between the protagonist and their romance, the relationship between the protagonist and their friends. I mean, those are two stories in and of themselves. The mentor story, right? You'll get a partial story for them. You'll get a partial story for the villain. Maybe there's a relationship between the protagonist and the mentor, or between the protagonist and the villain, right? Each of these are their own separate stories. And that's not to say they're not full stories. I mean, you're not creating a full villain story and a full protagonist story side by side, though, to be honest, that would actually be really cool. But you still get a partial story for the villain. So you can sympathize or empathize with them to give them a chance for redemption. But how do you create a story? All right, let's go ahead and make a very quick rundown of what the creative continuum is. Again, a narrative is a collection of stories. Oftentimes, a story begins with a hook, a way to entice the reader into diving into the narrative. And the story starts off with, in the middle or towards the end, of a character who is not going to be in the story till way down the road. But you get a partial story to see who they are, who the outside world is, before diving into the narrative. And then we get to start with the protagonist story, right? And the protagonist story has 7 segments: trust, agency, play, validation, identity, intimacy, and generativity. And you'll get to see that there are other stories scattered throughout that are separate but also cross. You might have the romance story be something that helps the character recognize their identity. So you get to see these stories run side by side but also cross into each other. Now, each of these 7 segments, while they all come together to create the stories that create the narrative, they can each be broken down into 5 segments. Each of these 5 segments are a little different, but the way that they work is very similar to Freytag's pyramid. Each of these segments holds a character's need, they hold a character's connection, and they hold a character's value. So usually these 5 acts start off with displaying the character's need, displaying what that need means, displaying someone helping take care of that need, and creating a bond between them and the character. That bond is finalized, and then they obtain a value, which is needed to move to the next story. Now, keep that in mind because we're going to come right back to it. But when breaking down these 5 scenes inside of each segment, you can break down each of the scenes into 7 beats. Now, a beat in and of itself can be defined a few different ways. Some people define it as a moment in story, which is great, but not overly helpful. It's the smallest element in story, but a beat in of itself can often be described as an action and a reaction. I like to define this as two separate beats. Every action and reaction are individual, indiscernible beats because a beat in and of itself can be divided down into four smaller parts that, when infused with the right meaning, create solid characters for each. All right. Now, you can have about 7 beats per character per scene. All right. And these per character aspects means that you're going to have characters or aspects of the world that either connect with or conflict with the beats of the protagonist. So let's go over what these 7 beats are. The first beat establishes who the character is in that moment. The second beat establishes what they want in that moment. The third beat after that establishes what they're willing to do to go get it. The fourth beat after that establishes the tests and trials that they're going to have to overcome to get to what they want. The fifth beat shows them getting what they want. The sixth beat shows who they are with that want. And the seventh beat shows who they are to the world with that. So, to give you a example right here, right now, I am a teacher. That's what I am. I want to be able to share the creative continuum with all of you so you all have the ideal narrative tool moving forward. I am willing to go outside of my comfort zone to do this, something that I didn't exactly want to do, but something that needs to be done to be able to share this type of stuff. The trials that I'm coming up with is that while I've committed to doing YouTube in my head, I just feel like I'm not going to make it. And because I feel like I'm not going to do good because no one's going to watch my stuff, why even bother? But I'm going to overcome that and I'm going to record this video. And by recording this video, I get what I want. I have the ability to teach you all. But then we get to see how I am with what I want. I'm going to post this video to YouTube and I am going to be a nervous wreck, right? Because that's just what we do. And I'm going to see who I am having gotten what I want. But then I get to see who I am and having gotten what I want to the world, which hopefully is positive comments and likes and shares. And through that, I'll be able to change how I feel in the next scene going forward, in the next part of my YouTube journey, right? Now, when you take each of those beats, you're breaking them down into 4 core. I'm sorry, let me back up a second. We don't have any connecting or conflicting beats, right? The 7th beat, who I am with the world. Hopefully, if this video does well, if I get likes and positive comments and stuff, that is a connecting beat. That is the YouTube audience sitting back and saying, we're going to connect with this. We're going to back him up. We're going to support him because he did a good job. Hopefully. But the conflicting beat comes from myself, me, my internal dialogue saying, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I can't get it done properly. Now, if there are other characters in the room in a bigger narrative, I might have someone who supports me or someone who might say, you know what? That sounds great, but I'd rather go play basketball. Let's go do that. I'm just kidding. I don't play sports. I'm sitting here in front of my computer recording narrative advice. That is not the example I should have used. But the point is that you get to see how these conflicting and connecting beats changes how the character feels going forward. And there's no one here in the room with me. The inner voice was my conflicting beat. The YouTube audience, hopefully, will be my connecting beat. Now, each of these beats can be broken down into 4 parts: an emotion, a behavior, a belief, and a value. All right. To give you an example, if someone was to push your character down into the street, they might get scared, run away, believe that they're worthless, and value self preservation. Or maybe instead, they might get angry, push back, believe that they are weak, but value power. Now, I gave you negative examples, but of course, there are positive ones, right? If that's usually what you end up with a conflicting beat, a negative emotion that pairs up with that. But if someone were to go and have a connecting beat, if they were to help your character up, they might be happy. They might give the person a hug. They might feel valued. And what they value is connection. So you get to see how meaningful each individual beat can be when you break it down into these 4 components. Now that we've broken it down into smallest bits, we have to build it back up. All right. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, each of these beats is a behavior that is changing. Every single time enough behaviors change where we change a scene, an emotion is going to change. We're going to move from a state of despair to sorrow, right? Where it gets less severe. Or maybe we're going to move from a state of joy and fear, which creates a sense of wonder, to a sense of sadness and fear, which I do not have my map on me. So I think it's something along the lines of despair, but I'd have to look it up, right? Using two emotions to create a compound emotion that switches back and forth. And we'll talk more about emotions in another video. But each of the 7 segments changes a belief that you have about yourself or the world. And by changing these beliefs, you create an entire story where a value is either changed or obtained, right? You take a story, something simple, right? Let's go ahead and do Toy Story. Woody started off with the value of, I need to take care of my kid. And that's a negative value. He had a value that essentially represents security. I've been taking care of my kid. I continue to take care of my kid. He's the priority, but I want to be secure in this aspect. But when he learned how to create new traditions, when he learned instead of pushing everyone away to be accepting of new people, it gave him the ability to give his kid more joy coming forward, right? He changed his value from a negative to a positive. Again, deserves its own video. But the point is that sometimes those values change, sometimes don't change, but you still have to get to them. But how do you get to them? How do you go through a story and get to each value? I told you that I would use this system to break down every concept of narrative for you, or to break down your narrative into the smallest aspects. And then I was going to build it back up and infuse it with meaning. And we did that, right? With the DNA of narrative, the emotions, the behaviors, the beliefs, and the values. But now it's time to do that with the segments. You see, each of these segments they represent a collection of assets that we as humans need in order to get through life. All right. So the first stage is trust. We need to be cared for. We see this obviously in infants who need their physiology cared for, right? They need to be fed, they need to be changed, they need to be sheltered, they need to feel warmth, right? But even in an advanced age, we still need that aspect for our lives to feel cared for, to feel important. In a new relationship, right? When you first get in, before you're ready to do any type of commitment, you want to know that this is someone who could care for you because they get excited for the conversation, because they love to listen to you speak, right? Then, when you feel cared for in some way, you begin to trust that individual. And when you trust that individual, you develop a sense of hope. This is a sense of hope for the future. Knowing that the future exists at all is a huge step forward. And we get to see this in the scenes, right? Normally, you'll set up the need in the first or second scene. Then you'll establish someone taking care of that need, what that need means, then someone taking care of it. That'll lead to the namesake of the segment, right? Trusting someone, which then leads to the fourth or fifth scene where you develop the value and the value helps you move forward, right? The trust segment's a little different because usually you have a character who is content, right? Or they're either super happy or they're getting by. And something either takes away their joy, takes away what was taking care of them, or makes them realize that they're not really being cared for enough. And so that takes up the first and second segment, right? So it's a little different here, right? You establish who they are, you establish that it's taken away or not enough, you establish that they need care, someone comes and cares for them, then they develop, they trust for them to trust that person, and then they have hope moving forward. That's why there's so many components in the second act, but the first act, just that first segment takes a little bit more time. Now, we can get into the second segment, which is agency. Just because you have hope for the future doesn't mean you feel safe moving forward. I mean, the future is unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if that person you want to ask out is going to say yes. So why even bother? You don't feel safe. But someone or something comes along to make you feel safe. I told you that my system would prove the hero's journey correct. This is one of those examples. This is where you have the supernatural aid. This is where you get to experience that concept, that abstract idea, that symbol that we've been using for so long and see what it really means. It means that something in your life comes along and says, guess what? This is safe. Try it. Through that safety, you feel a sense of agency. You feel a sense that you can make a decision to make your life move forward and it's going to be okay. And so by making that decision, you are then able to have a sense of willpower, the ability, the strength, really, to drive you through harder times. After that, we move on to the third segment, which is play. This starts off where you begin to feel like this is very much why I need my notes around. Despite the fact that I developed this, I study this full time, I still end up forgetting so much of this. And it would be so much better if I had had my notes, which let me take just a quick second to say I do have a variety of visual resources that I'll be slowly putting out over the next few weeks. And these visual resources, they're not designed to help you understand things right away, right? That's what these videos are for. These visual resources that I'm releasing are just here to say, hey, guess what? If you forget, here's a reference point. You know what it means. You just forgot what it was. So I'm going to have to go back and think through exactly what the needs are, right? We have care needs, we have safety needs, belonging needs. You've entered into a new area and you don't know what to do. You don't know where you belong. You don't know how to fit in. You've come into a new world, entered a new relationship, made a decision that's put you into an uncomfortable place. And through that, you are you don't have a spot to belong. So something comes and covers that up. And because you finally feel like you have a place to belong, you all of a sudden have a sense of play, of engaging with the world in such a way where you can grow. And through that growth, you begin to understand what your connection to this new environment is. And that gives you the value of purpose, understanding that there is a reason why you are here. Absolutely a reason why you are here. And this brings us into the fourth segment, which is validation. Here you have an esteem need. You have low self-esteem because despite the fact that you found a purpose, this is still a new area. This is still a new thing that you're learning. It is exhausting and you don't feel like you belong. Despite the fact that we covered that belonging need, your esteem needs to be higher to keep you there. Even with this purpose, you still feel like an imposter. I know I'm sitting here and yeah, I've got a new structure that I want to share with you guys, but there is no better channel and narrative than Implicitly Pretentious. They have the best editing. They have some of the best scripts. I mean, you're not going to be able to beat him. So why even bother? When someone comes along and helps you realize that you can do this, when they come along and say, guess what? You got this. When they help raise your self-esteem, you then are validated. You can then take on the tests that are set in front of you. You can put in the effort. And by doing that, by putting the effort forward, you are validated when you succeed. When you walk away and there is, non-specific example, a couple of likes on your video, you know that you can keep going. This validation leads to a sense of confidence. And this confidence allows you to feel not only like you belong, but that you being there is an asset to everyone else. And that gives you the ability to move on to the next stage, which is identity. There is no concept on this planet, especially in the abstract world, more complicated than identity. Obviously, there are things about space and even within the ocean that we don't know, but those are things that we'll be able to find out. And those are things we have the technology to. Once we know what it is, we'll be able to figure out how it works. But identity is something we've had since the dawn of time, and it is complicated. It is exhausting. People put so much emphasis on who they are, on their identity, based on such superficial things. Their politics, their religion, their race, their gender. And they do that because identity is insane. It is complicated. It is something that is so hard to truly understand. And it took me a long time to understand it as well. You see, once you get into this phase, you have a cognitive need. You have a need to understand yourself and who you are. And a lot of people will fail this stage because they'll reach for something superficial. But the goal here is that you understand why you're here is because you wanted something and it's time for you to go get it. Now, here's the deal. We often talk a lot about want versus need and about how you need to get the need to get to the want, or sometimes the need set changes what your want is, or sometimes you don't get your want, but you do get your need. Want and need is going back and talking about value, right? At the end of the day, you want to date this person. Why do you want to date this person, right? Well, maybe because you don't want to be alone. Maybe because this person is very extroverted and you're introverted and you're really jealous of people who could be extroverted, but this person, she doesn't she doesn't like ignore you just because you're introverted. She tries to bring you in and you want that and you're attracted to that, right? So what you value isn't just the physical object you're going after. That is a really bad phrase to use after talking about an individual. But even if you're going after, I have a pop collection that is way too big. And that is the physical manifestation of me saying, I want to be understood. Because these toys say, hey, these are the shows that I've watched. Have you watched these shows? You have. So you can relate to these characters. Great. So then you understand these characters, then you understand me. There is something deep down that the physical manifestation of these wants and desires brings us back to a sense of what we truly deeply desire. Once you understand that, once you understand what you're going for and you align yourself with that want, with what can truly give you that want, and those physical manifestations, this is not some minimalistic preaching section saying, you don't really want all your stuff. You want what your stuff represents. No, get the physical stuff. Like, I believe that stuff, even if it's temporary, even if it's just a dopamine hit, can give you enough joy, but also can give you understanding to understand what you're truly going for. It is a great stepping stone. But that being said, once you understand what your want is, you then have an identity, right? You have an identity as a boyfriend, as a husband, as a father, as a mother. And again, what does that desire represent? A desire to care for someone younger, a desire to care for someone who is also caring for you. Maybe you have identity as a YouTuber, right? What is your value? Teaching other people how to live the best version of their lives, right? I am trying to teach people how the best way is to write. And what writing is to me is, how do I take something that no one ever understood about me and turn it into a format that everyone can enjoy, but especially the people who truly understand it can finally truly understand me. I value understanding, but my identity as a YouTuber is, how do I teach other people to get people to understand them as well? And once you develop that identity, you develop a sense of fidelity. That fidelity is a loyalty to yourself, to the commitments that you have made to yourself, to what you want to accomplish. At the end of the day, for me, hopefully, as I post more and more to YouTube, there will be a loyalty to this. And that loyalty comes from people are responding well to my content. I am being validated. And because of that, I know that I'm helping people understand how to write better stories and how to get other people to understand them. And through that, I will become loyal to YouTube because it has become a part of my identity. One part of my identity, but my identity nonetheless. The next phase to talk about is intimacy. The intimacy phase, oh my goodness, it's so easy. Once you're finally done with the identity phase, everything else is just like, oh, I got this. I'm fine. I just finally got to the top of Mount Everest. I got my skis on. I can slide right down. Pretty sure that's not how that works, by the way. Don't try that. But everything else just seems so easy. The identity phase, you have an aesthetic need, okay? So it's still a little bit more complicated than some of the previous phases, but essentially, becoming a new person has you look at the world in a different way, has you look at others in a different way. And so because of that, it's hard to know where the beauty in life is found, right? If you go along and you just enjoy movies and you enjoy stuff, you're looking at movies in a way where, oh, this movie's so pretty. I like this movie. I like how it makes me feel. But then when you become a writer and you understand what it really means to be a writer, you don't just see the movies as, oh, that's a beautiful piece of art that helped me feel good, right? You understand it as, this is a tool of communication that someone wanted to be understood and help guide other people along their path. You start off with that aesthetic need, a need to see the world in a new way with new beauty and new love. And eventually you find other people who, when you see this through their eyes, when you read Robert McKee's book, right? And you see that story is a metaphor for life, and you're able to start making those connections. These people introduce you to a new way of seeing the world, and there's an intimacy there, a relationship, a connection there. And through that, you gain the ability to love. You gain the ability to love things and people in a new way. Sure, you love your friends, but now that you know how to write, you start seeing their life in a new way, and you can love them in a new way by showing them that you understand the difficulties that before you didn't even see as you guys were just out there playing basketball. Why on earth is that my example? Why is that I'm way too much of a nerd for that. But as you're able to love others, you get to the last phase, the generativity, right? And the generativity is about giving back. So you have a need to care. I'm sorry, that is incorrect. You have a need of self transcendence. You understand who you are, you understand how to see the world in a new way, but you don't understand what your purpose is in the world. Sure, you found a purpose in writing in that third stage, but you need to understand what your life means to the world. That's what generativity is about. And when you understand how you can give back, sure, I could get on YouTube and give writing tips and tricks, and that would be great. One of the things I love about Implicitly Pretentious is how he doesn't just view story with wants and needs, right? I'm critiquing a lot of classic writing bits. That's not fair of me because these are great writing bits. That's where I started. But he sees it through a psychological lens. He provides it through a new way. And I'm hoping that I can add new insight to the world through the creative continuum, right? That is my self transcendence. That is my ability that it makes me unique. Though you don't have to be unique, right? You can be, but sometimes you can represent something to someone that they couldn't understand another way. That's, again, an absolutely its own video that deserves that. But you feel the need to care for somebody else, just as in the beginning, someone cared for you. It comes around full circle because you understand that you needed this. And because of that, you feel the need to provide it. It's not paying it back, it's paying it forward. It's understanding that they cared for you because it was a part of who they were. And now it's a part of who you are as well. By finding a way to care for others, you are being generous. This is where the generativity comes in. You are giving your time, your expertise to other people. And that's not to say that you can't charge money for them, right? I mean, for me, one of the things they'll teach you about YouTube is you give value. And you give that value away for free through things like YouTube. You sell stuff afterwards, but there's value in what you do, right? I can charge whatever I want for this, but I'm still saving you tons of time and research that I did in a new system that will really help your writing shine. Absolutely help your writing shine. And whether I charge for that, whether I give you these free hints and tips here, I'm providing some sort of value to you. I'm giving back to the world from my identity, whether it's transactional or not. And through that generativity, I develop the value of care. I needed to find my place in the world. I found a way to give back, and I can now care about everyone who's learned from me. How do I use this and my skills to help your story get better? And here's the funny thing. You can't move from one to the next without it being harder. You need hope in the future to make decisions. You need to be able to make decisions to find a purpose. You need to be able to have a purpose to be tested along the lines of that purpose and yet not walk away when you fail because you know the direction you want to take, right? You need to have the confidence that you can do it to maintain a sense of loyalty to what you're trying to do. You need to have that loyalty when you're alone before you have a sense of love with everyone who surrounded you and helped you. And you need that sense of love in order to care for the world. And one of the things that you should not do is pass every segment, right? Sure, we talked about there are a lot of issues, but you take the movie Zootopia, right? Her identity was to become a cop, and she became a good cop, but at the cost of everything else because her values were on backwards, right? She wanted to follow the laws as they were, follow the evidence as it was without looking into the bigger picture. And she caused so much damage by doing that, right? That she ended up walking away. She failed her path. She could not develop the loyalty to her dream because there was a negative value attached to it. It was only when she understood that there is a bigger picture that she has to look into because it's not just about the facts, it's about the heart of what's going on that she was able to come back, reforge her identity, and move forward. A villain story, they might pass one or two segments and then fail the next one, right? Maybe they fail their intimacy side, right? I think that that's really the progress of Darth Vader. He got to this identity of becoming a Jedi, right? He trusted the Jedi. He made a decision to continue his training to become a Padawan. He grew in that. He was tested by the Clone Wars. He became a Jedi Knight. But then, when he got to this phase of intimacy, that he couldn't hold on to everything that he had built up over the years. And because of that, he lost that love for everything and it just turned to hate. And that hatred is what brought him to the dark side. We get to see a few of those phases of the villain and we see where they fail. We get to sympathize, we get to empathize, and we get to see that there's a path to redemption for them. The mentor figure has already had their story, but maybe you get to see how they give back and care for the world, right? You get to see their relationship develop with the hero. You get to see how all of this stuff completely comes and intertwines, how you can break it down into the smallest bits and add meaning. Now, there's a lot more to the creative continuum than just this. I've broken down the emotions, I've broken down behaviors, I've broken down values. I've got, some world building tips and techniques. I'm not Hello Future Me by any means. Do that, buy his books. Because that if you're big into the world building, that's exactly where you want to be. But this is the key to story, right? It's the key to narrative, but it's not just the key to narrative, it's the key to life. It's the key to your story. When you're sitting there and you're in some level of despair, right? It's because you don't have the hope for a future, right? So how do you get that hope? Well, you have someone who comes in and cares for you, right? I mean, how many people go out with a wingman for date night, right? Because you have someone who's there to say, whoa, 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 whoa. I understand that you didn't get this person, but there's 9 billion people on the planet. There's someone else who will fit your taste, who will go really, really well. I'm here to care for you, to make sure that you can move forward and that hope for a future to walk out of the bar with someone who may last a day, a week, a month, maybe a lifelong partner. That hope is what keeps you going. This is why the creative continuum is important. Because at the end of the day, the supernatural aid, that is the item that provides safety, that gives you the agency and the willpower to move forward. Someone's already done that. It looks different. And you know what? I'm not someone who has a lot of self-confidence, but I'm very impressed with my system. I'm very impressed that I can not only tell you the supernatural aid is important, I can tell you exactly why it's important. We've moved it from a sense of a sense of narrative, of abstract concepts to a concrete, no, this is exactly why it matters. And that's cool, right? That's really cool. But the real key here is to sit back and be like, what was your supernatural aid? Right? Someone said, hey, I'm going to be your wingman. I'm going to go out to the bar with you. Right? They provide you that hope. But they also were your supernatural aid. They also provide you the willpower to ask people out. Right? What is your supernatural aid? What emotions did it make you feel? What did it have you do? Because what did it help you believe to get to where to what you value the most? It's not just about organizing your story. It's about taking your inspiration, taking everything that you want to write in this story, right? But before you create, you want to break it down into the smallest parts. And then you want to take your memories, the things that inspired you. You want to break those down to the smallest parts. You want to make sure that meaning is in there. And then you can use this to build your narrative back up. You don't have to have every beat or every scene or every segment. In fact, there's a lot of times where these beats and scenes and segments, you can have one narrative moment that represents multiple beats. You can have one scene that doesn't just close out the last scene in the segment, but also introduces the first, right? These things can be more efficient. And that is not a bad thing, to be more efficient. You want a shorter story? Be more efficient with what you're doing. You want a shorter narrative. You want a longer narrative? You add more individual stories. But the key with the creative continuum, the value of the creative continuum, is not in narrative. It's great for that, but you have tools for that. It's in breaking down life to make sure that what you're writing is fact wrapped up in fiction. Creativity is just the focus of your imagination, but your imagination is inspired by your experience. And it's that experience that people want to share with you.